Hello, Steve here, and this is my weekly diet update. I'm ashamed to say I weigh the same as I did last week and the week before. I'm still at 240. I don't know if I'm still recovering from Thanksgiving dinner or maybe I've been eating too much KFC on the weekend, but either that or I'm lifting too many weights at the gym. I'm not really trying to put on weight, I'm trying to lose weight, and I have been, but the last couple of weeks I've stayed about the same. I think it was because of, like I said, Thanksgiving dinner and eating all the leftovers. But I feel like I'm looking thinner than I was, and people keep telling me I look thinner, so I must be doing something right. So anyway, I just have to step up my game in some way, so I start losing more weight. I want to get down to about 200. I'm 240 right now. But anyway, this week I will be showing you my Sega Genesis collection and Sega CD collection. I never really had that many Sega Genesis games. When I was a kid, it was all Nintendo and Super Nintendo. Anyway, here is my Sega Genesis. Like I said, I never had one when I was a kid. I picked this up at the flea market for $5 with no connections and no controller. And then I found a controller at a yard sale with a couple games for maybe $2 or $3, and then I got the AC adapter. I think that was the most expensive part. I think that was $8, so it was probably around like $15 for everything by the time I got all the attachments and a few games. And then of course I have oh, and then I bought the 6-button controller to play Street Fighter. And then last Christmas, I think it was either my mom or my sister bought me this. The At Games Sega Genesis. It has about 30 Sega Genesis games built in, and then maybe 20 more little puzzle games. And then it comes with 2 wireless controllers and a slot to plug in real Sega Genesis games, so you could actually play Sega Genesis games on this. The original Sega Genesis games you could play on this. So I like this a lot. I know it's cheap and it feels flimsy and the controllers are not that great, but you can also plug in the original controllers into the ports. You can also plug in the original controllers into the ports, and it has all the best games on there. It has all the Sonics, all the Streets of Rage games. The one thing that really irritates me about this is the sound is really horrible. It sounds like one of the music channels or the tracks is off key, so you'll be listening to a song on the game in the background, and one, like, the bass will be off a key and it just sounds horrible. Or one of the tracks that you'll be playing Street Fighter or Streets of Rage, and you know how the song goes, but it sounds horrible on this thing because it's off, the music is off key with one of the instruments. But anyway, I'm not knocking it. I like this thing. I played it a lot. I actually beat Streets of Rage 2 for the first time on this. That's the first beat 'em up game I've ever beaten without infinite continues. And here's probably my favorite Sega Genesis. I never had the real Sega CD player, but I have this JVC XI. I got this later on when I was a kid because it was really cheap. It was around the time PlayStation came out, and my parents couldn't afford a PlayStation, but I saw this thing at Target or Walmart, and I asked for it for Christmas. It was only $40. This is not my original one. I ended up selling that for about what I paid for it to put money in to buy a PlayStation. I finally saved up enough to buy a PlayStation. But this is what I had before a PlayStation, and I enjoyed it a lot. This is the first time I ever had a Sega Genesis. You can plug in Sega Genesis carts, and it'll play Sega CD games. And this thing was really cheap at the time, and it came with a game and an encyclopedia and a karaoke player, and I think it even came with a microphone. But you could do karaoke with it, play Sega Genesis games and Sega CD games. And I had never played anything like Sega CD games before, so they blew my mind when I was a kid. I think it was in like middle school or high school when I got this. Yeah, but I really like this thing, and you could listen to music CDs on it, of course. But I ended up selling my original one, and then I found out these things are worth a fortune now. I think they're $200 on eBay. And then, so I was kind of depressed that I gave it up because I did enjoy it. I just had to sell it to put money towards my PlayStation 1. A couple years back, I was at a yard sale in my hometown, and this house was selling a bunch of video games, old video games. They had a Super Nintendo for $8, but I didn't get that because I didn't have enough cash on me. But I did have $5, and that's what I spent on this, $5, and it works. So this is probably the best pickup I ever got at a garage sale as far as video games. $5 for this JVC XI, and it had a controller with it. It didn't have the RF switch, but you can use any AV cables. And it didn't have the AC adapter, and I guess that's a hard piece to find, but a video game reseller at the flea market I was talking to gave me one. He had an extra one and he gave it to me. So I have this to play. If you plug in a Sega Genesis AC adapter, you can play the Sega Genesis games, but it won't work with the CD player, so I probably wouldn't advise to do that. I don't know if it's good for it or not. So you have to have the special adapter. It's the same adapter that the Sega Nomad used. Anyway, but I like this thing a lot. This is what sort of opened my eyes to Sega and how cool the Genesis was and the Sega CD. Because before that it was all Nintendo. Anyway, my games. Here's a Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. When I was a kid, I had all these Street Fighter games on Super Nintendo, and I looked at the screenshots of the Sega Genesis ones, and I thought, oh, that looks like crap, or it's not as good as the Super Nintendo. But now that I played it, it actually is pretty close to the Super Nintendo. The sound on it actually sounds more like the arcade. I'm not saying it sounds better than the Super Nintendo, because the Super Nintendo, to me, the music and the sound was way better, but this actually does sound more like the arcade music on the Sega Genesis version. I don't think it looks quite as sharp or as detailed, because I don't think it can display as many colors as Super Nintendo or something or other. But I mean, it's really good. If it was my only Street Fighter game, I would be happy. And here's Crew Ball with a weird cartridge with a yellow tab on it. I don't know what that's for. Crew Ball is a pinball game. I'm not really into these video pinball games, but this was at a yard sale for about 50 cents, so I got it. Battle Squadron. That's a shooter game. I've never been into shooter games, but it was 50 cents at the yard sale, so I picked it up. I try to play them, but I just can't get into them, and I'm not that good at shooting space shooter games, shoot 'em ups or whatever you call them. Here's RBI Baseball 3. I got it at the Goodwill for $3 because I liked RBI Baseball 1 on Super Nintendo, so I thought I'd like this. Here's Monday Night Raw for Sega Genesis, a wrestling game. Art of Fighting on Sega Genesis. This is pretty good, but I like the Super Nintendo version better because it had infinite continues, and this game is really hard. Tecmo Super Bowl. I had to pick that one up. It was at the Goodwill for a couple bucks. Sega Genesis 6-pack. This is all you need right here, really. It has Golden Axe, Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage 1, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Super Hang-On. So there are a lot of fun games on one cartridge. I would say if you don't have a Sega Genesis or this thing, get this compilation on PS3 or Xbox 360. It's called Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. This has all the best games on here, and I think you can get it for less than $20 and play it on your PS3 or Xbox 360. Here's Royal Rumble in the case. WWF Royal Rumble. I like this for Super Nintendo when I was a kid, so I got it on Genesis I think I got this at the flea market. The Super Nintendo one didn't have Hulk Hogan. This one has Hulk Hogan, and it has Papa Shango and Rick Martel, and they were never on the Super Nintendo ones. It's funny to listen to the little 16-bit renditions of the wrestlers' theme music on those games. Here's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in a case. I got this one and the next two at the Goodwill for like $4. They were all taped together. NHL 96. I hear this is one of the better ones. I'm not really into sports games. And Sega Sports College Football. And then for Sega CD, I have Final Fight. This is the best version of Final Fight that ever came to a console, I think, until they just have the arcade perfect downloads now for the new systems. But at the time, this was the best you could get, and the music on here was the bee's knees. I know people gloat about Streets of Rage music, and yeah, that's great, but if you listen to the orchestrated and like rock versions of this Final Fight music, it is the business. I know it's really dorky, but I used to put this CD in my car and drive around when I delivered pizzas and listen to the soundtrack on this game. Just the music tracks are off the hook. And then the game is better than any other version I played at the time. You could actually play 2 players at once, and you could pick all 3 characters. Here's Prize Fighter for Sega CD. This game blew my mind at the time. I know nowadays people would say, oh, big deal, that's garbage, the low resolution little videos on there, but at the time this was really cool to me. You could play, it was like playing a movie. This is probably my favorite boxing game other than Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I had fun with this game a lot. I couldn't believe this at the time. It was like a real video of a boxer. Like your first person view, you just see your boxing gloves in front of the screen, and they're like superimposed in front of a video, and the video sees your opponent, and your opponent's dancing around the ring and jabbing at you and throwing shots at you, and you have to block them with those gloves that are overlaid on the screen when he attacks. And when you see an opening, you attack the video, and if you get it right, it'll cut to another shot of the guy getting hit wherever you hit him. If you hit him in the side, you'd see him react, or if you hit him in the head, you'd see him react, or if he blocked it, or if you hit him in the wrong time, you just see him block it. But that blew my mind at the time, so you just had to see the guy dancing around the ring from your first person perspective and throw the shots where you needed to. And I think there were only about 4 or 5 fights, and it kind of played out like a movie. I really like this game a lot. If they did something like this now, it would look really good. Back then it was that low resolution black and white video, but it looked really cool at the time. I'd never seen anything like it. I've always liked these FMV video games. Something about it really tickled me at the time, that it was actually like a movie that you were playing. Here's ESPN Sunday Night Football. I don't know how that is. I'm not really into sports games, but this, I got it for 50 cents at a yard sale, so I was happy to buy that. It's supposed to have good audio, like real commentary and all that. Here's Double Switch. This is a full motion video game, and I think you're managing a museum security. From what I remember, it's kind of like Night Trap. I never had Night Trap, but this is similar from what I remember. You're like in charge of a museum's security, and you're trying to keep an eye on the museum and trying to keep people from stealing. I don't remember. I wasn't really that good at it, but this sort of thing tickled me, these interactive movie games. I like these. And here's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I got this at the same garage sale for 50 cents. It's nothing like the other console games. This is actually just a movie. It's actually like an episode or 2 of Power Rangers with that low resolution, crappy FMV look. But it has It's like quick timed events like Shinmu, like you're just going through an entire episode of Power Rangers, but you have to hit the button at the right minute, otherwise the characters will die or you'll lose. And this one was a lot easier, it gave you a lot more reaction time. Similar to the quick timed events in Resident Evil on the cutscenes, only the whole game is that and it's Power Rangers. I was never into Power Rangers because I think I was a teenager at the time and I thought I was too cool for that. But now that I look back, they were pretty cool martial artists in here. They did a lot of good stunt work and there were monsters and robots and everything fighting. Here's another one of those full motion video games. This is pretty much just a movie. Wirehead. It's some guy's being controlled by a video. He's being controlled by a video game controller, and you're supposed to be controlling him through his life. And the government's trying to get this technology back, and so he has to run away. So it's all just one big, huge, quick time sequence of quick timed events. The guy who plays in it is the guy from Batman Returns that got his nose bit off by the penguin. But this guy's hilarious. He's doing all sorts of slapstick stunts and everything. He's trying to run away. You have to guide him in the right direction, otherwise he'll eat the pavement or whatever. But this is a pretty funny game. It's all trial and error. You just have to memorize the right sequence of his path to get it down. It's kind of time consuming, so I never beat it, but it's fun. For what I played, it's pretty fun. Here's Surgical Strike. This is another full motion video game. This one's like a rail shooter that's on a, you're in a tank and you're going through battles. It's really cool looking. Like there are a lot of little miniature sets that you're going through with a tank and you're blowing stuff up. Every time you shoot something, it'll cut to a scene where a building's blowing up or a guy is blowing up and flying through the air. But it's pretty much just a rail shooter on a video and it looks really cool. It's really a low resolution compared to games now, but at the time I can see how this would have been really cool. And then it has the little cheesy cutscenes with the actors. But anyway, it was fun. Oh, I got through all that quicker than I thought. Like I said, I don't have that many Sega Genesis games, but what I do have, I enjoy it. So I guess I'll see you next week with my diet update. Hopefully I'll lose a couple pounds by then. Bye.